Loughton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm very proud to not only be part of this debate today and to see this bill effectively come of age, for NCS comes of age with this bill, just as NCS is a coming-of-age project. But I'm very proud in the small part I played in its genesis, having been there back in 2005 when it was a germ of an idea from the then Prime Minister, who spoke to a number of youth leaders, and he tasked Paul Aginski, who later became David Cameron's youth advisor, who runs the youth training organisation PDP, to go out and develop a programme, and I was asked to be part of that. And in 2008, I think it was, we published the It's Time to Inspire British Teenagers, which was effectively a white paper which raised the whole subject of what became NCS and consulted on it. And the scheme was designed on the principles laid out in that unofficial white paper, with the help of people like Steve Hilton, who some may remember, who had an even more ambitious idea for the scheme, that it should take at least 6 weeks long throughout the summer and be called National Service, and will be much closer to the original scheme, on which it has some echoes, but also that it should become compulsory. Well, after a great deal of research, and I remember spending many weekends with groups of fantastically gobby young people from Leeds, Liverpool and London, who had some amazing ideas as to how such a scheme should develop, we put together what then became the National Citizen Service. It was intended to be a rites of passage scheme. We do transition into adulthood really badly in this country. Other cultures, other countries, there is a point in a teenager's life when you can be said to transition into adulthood and gain the respect of society as an adult. But in this country, we don't really do that. Too often, growing up is characterised by negatives. Do you become an adult when you had your first fag behind the bike shed, or when you became a teenage pregnancy statistic, or other negatives? Too often is how we judge and gauge the progress of young people. This scheme is all about the positives of young people, and if you go through a scheme which is rigorous, which is challenging and was designed to do so, and you make those sacrifices as part of it, then you deserve the right to be respected and valued as an adult with a voice in society. And that was one of the guiding principles behind the reason this scheme was set up. It was also absolutely about social mixing. And we have many other really good schemes, and have done for many years in this country. But none of them, I think, are as successful as social mixing as NCS has become. Too often, kids from the same school or the same neighbourhood may go on an outward-bound project or be part of some local youth organisation. But not often enough are they mixed up with people they would never come across ordinarily, or pass the time of day with in the street, from the other side of town, the other side of the tracks, the other side of the country. So social mixing was absolutely at the heart of all of this. It was also about challenging young people, taking them out of their comfort zone. This isn't a holiday camp. I've been on many of NCS challenges over many years now, and my honourable friend from Aldridge Brownhill said that she took up the challenge of having to paint. I've been forced to go on Jacob's ladders and climbing walls, which is no mean feat, and it's particularly no mean feat for the young people who have to haul you up part of that Jacob's ladder as well. So the challenge for me was just as much for them. But I've met kids who'd never been out of a city, who'd never been out on a moor, who'd never waded through a stream in the Brecon Beacons or the Lake District or whatever. These were new, challenging and often frightening experiences. But that was part of NCS, taking you out of your comfort zone and showing you there is more to life, and with the help of your team, being able to conquer it. And literally, I have seen a kid fresh out of a youth justice establishment holding one end of the rope, and the other end, precariously dangling on a climbing wall, is an Etonian, and vice versa. Two people who may never have come together ordinarily are thrown together and absolutely rely on each other in order to get through that challenge. That's why the scheme is so successful. That was one of the guiding principles, and also about engendering a sense of social responsibility and community cohesion sustainably as well. And as the Honourable Member for Gedling mentioned, it is about self-esteem and confidence. And so much of the feedback from young people who've been through this scheme is when they go on the graduation ceremony, when they have to perform and have to speak up in front of an audience of hundreds, they all say, gosh, I would never have been able to do that if it hadn't been for this scheme, and the other challenges that it inspires them and instills them with confidence to do. There's a great saying which I always use from the late, great Anita Roddick, who said, if you think you are too small to make a difference, try going to bed with a mosquito. Well, the whole point of NCS was to unleash a swarm of mosquitoes, young people who on their own may not have much of an effect, but emboldened by being valued in such a scheme, by working together with other like-minded people, actually have the confidence to go out and make a difference. It was part of this scheme, the Positive for Youth policy, which we developed in the Department for Education as well, and it shouldn't be seen in isolation. NCS isn't a scheme for its own sake. It's part of a bigger jigsaw of how we empower, engage, inspire and instill confidence in young people. But it's also about society gaining respect for young people. And one of the big problems we have still in society today, it was mentioned by other honourable members, is an intergenerational divide. Too often, older people regard younger people as all a bit reckless and a bunch of hoodlums. Too often, younger people think that older people are too set in their ways, a bit detached and retrograde, and etc., etc. I could go on. NCS is about young people doing something worthwhile, being seen to do something worthwhile, making sacrifices and gaining the respect of the rest of society, not least older people in our society, and trying to bring those generations together. That is one of the biggest challenges we still have in our society in this country. And my great vision in helping to develop NCS was that around the country we would have projects set up as part of these social action projects, sustainable projects. It may be nature conservation projects, it may be sexual health projects, a huge variety, and we've had some very good examples from the Secretary of State, of which there will be a big sign saying this project is part of the National Citizen Service set up by and run by young people. And what a fantastic billboard and advert for the constructive stuff that our young people do, too often being denigrated by the rest of society, but particularly the media. And yet we know that proportionately, young people are much more likely than any other generation to be volunteers and spending their time in volunteering, and they're not given the credit for it. And NCS is one way of making that much more high profile. So when the first pilot started in 2009, 160 young people went through it. My fear at the time was this would be used as a sort of cheap summer holiday camp, perhaps by some of the middle classes. How wrong I was. On that first pilot, 60% of the young people who went on it were black girls from inner cities, and did fantastically well. And we had to encourage the middle classes and others to say, look, you can get involved in this too, and eventually that has happened. So then we came into government in 2010. The responsibility was shared between the Cabinet Office and the Department for Education. And on a very small budget to start with, and certainly no budget to promote and publicise the scheme, it really took off. At a difficult time of austerity, when a lot of money was put into this, at a time when youth services were being unduly and unfairly hit through local authority cuts in funding, but it got off the ground. And 6 years on, Madam Deputy Speaker, 300,000, more than 300,000 teenagers have now taken part, some 93,000 in the last calendar year. Now, the Honourable Gentleman for Gedling is right. The cohort is something like 720,000. And absolutely, this scheme should be available to all of them. To be realistic, we need to make sure we do not diminish and dilute the quality of what is being offered. And the only thing holding it back is the availability of good quality, well-trained leaders on these programmes. So what I don't want is to artificially try and reach a target which might be at the expense of diluting the value and the quality of the programme. And there is a big question mark about the capability of NCS to continue to train up leaders within its own organisation, and, as we've heard, for NCS graduates to come back as youth leaders themselves, rather than to poach them from other youth groups, which would not be helpful. But the figures again about that social and ethnic mix: 30% of young people doing the scheme at the moment are from BMI communities. 17% free school meal qualifying young people, more than double the percentage in the population. And I'm sure, as many honourable members will have done, to go to those graduation ceremonies where young people will get up on a stage, be given their certificate, in many cases will strut their stuff. I went to one at Wembley Stadium where 1,000 young people had graduated through the various football schemes in front of 1,000 people in the audience, every one of them getting up and doing their bit. It was a hugely uplifting and emotional sight. And the number of parents who come up to me afterwards and said, "This is the best scheme I've ever had for my son or daughter. Why do you keep it such a secret?" And that's part of the problem. This scheme is hugely undersold in terms of the actual outcomes and achievements and good that it does. I want to see, again as was envisaged, I want to see some really good examples of the social action projects which have come about through the NCS, feature in television programmes, feature in national newspapers and magazines. I want a competition every year, which there was, between the best social action projects in certain different categories. We need an equivalent of the Oscars for the National Citizen Service to show people really what is being achieved by the most inspiring and dedicated young people and all those behind them. So I'm a big supporter, Madam Different Deputy Speaker, of the NCS and of this bill here today. I just have a couple of technical comments to take up in the bill itself. In Clause 1, subsection 2, it says, for the purposes of this section, young people means 16 and 17-year-olds, but may also include other persons who are 15 years old or have attained the age of 18, but are under the age of 25. Madam Speaker, I don't know many 16 or 17-year-olds or 15 or 18-year-olds who are not under the age of 25, so I'm not quite sure what that clause is doing there. But the other point I'd make, also in the same subsection, is, of course, it just talks about England. And we know that this scheme at the moment is confined to England, although we have tried in the past to extend it to other parts of the kingdom, but of course it's a devolved matter, and Northern Ireland in particular showed a lot of interest in this. I would hope that the National Citizen Service can become a United Kingdom wide programme with the buy-in of the assemblies and parliaments in the other parts of the United Kingdom, and I would hope that we would not have to have a new piece of legislation to make that possible, because this bill does just limit it in its terminology to England. And the clauses about preparing accounts and business plans and annual reports are all standard, absolutely. But just to be constructively critical, and the point I did raise with the Secretary of State earlier, this isn't just about numbers. It's not just about the quality of this specific explicit programme itself. It's not just about the amount of money we are spending on it. But it needs to be seen in the context of the wider youth offer as well. So we need to be able to judge, and there needs to be a mechanism to do this, and this was raised in the other place as well, that how we raise and judge the quality of what the NCS is achieving against other youth programmes, and the value for money we are getting against other investments in other youth organisations as well. This cannot be seen as a standalone intervention for young people. NCS is not there just for NCS sake. And of course, it only starts at the age of 16 and thereabouts. And the problems that the NCS tries to address start earlier and need earlier intervention as well. Some 42% of young people, more fully committed to social action, began getting involved before the age of 10. And the Scouts point out that the NCS 3-week programme, which costs around £1,500 per person, although the National Audit Office has come up with a new report raising that to nearer 1,862, the Scouts will claim that they can establish a place for a young person in an area of deprivation for between £400 and £550, and they have 45,000 people on their waiting list to join the Scouts because they haven't got sufficient people to be those Scout leaders. Now, that is fine. There are places for both. And particularly if the NCS is providing leaders, as it was intended to do, not just to come back and help lead the NCS, but to go and help all those other youth organisations and community organisations as well. The NCS is a recruiting sergeant, if it works properly, for a whole host of other youth organisations whose expansion can often be curtailed by the lack of youth leaders and properly trained youth experts as well. So my plea, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that we need more detail to make it more sustainable and to make it more complementary and not conflictual with other youth organisations doing some really good stuff in other parts of the kingdom, that we need to make sure we can justify its expense and its quality in the greater context of what else is going on as well. So there's a lot of ambition in NCS. A lot of it has come about, and we need to do a lot more to make it more widely available to a great many more young people who can benefit from it, just as the evidence has showed 300,000 have so far. But we need some guarantees, I think, about value for money across the whole of the sector, about the quality impact across the whole sector, and about the sustainability of ongoing volunteering in those NCS graduates, not just for the duration of the scheme itself, and how those social action projects are not just there for a matter of weeks, but they are there for perpetuity with other local organisations, with the local authorities, the local businesses, local volunteers, helping to run those projects in between those summer experiences for the NCS cohorts. So I do wish this bill well. There are some questions, I think, which will come out during committee which will add yet further to the quality of this programme, but more importantly, add yet further to the enthusiasm of other people involved in helping young people in our society today. And if there was one good thing, there was lots of good things, but if there's one good thing that we can all agree on that came out of the Brexit debate, which has been mentioned even in this subject, and I've avoided mentioning so far, is that the turnout of young people in the Brexit referendum, well, it wasn't called the Brexit referendum, but that's what it became, was some 63%, against a turnout of young people in a normal general election of some 43%. NCS can be part of the solution for persuading and encouraging young people to be part of the decision-making in our society. It's a great example of how young people were involved in its design. It should be a great example of how young people should continue to be involved in the fabric, the future of our country as a whole.